I was the one who got handcuffed and shoved into a police car like a criminal suspect, but my daughter painted me on paper as a hero holding electric clippers. Even her new teacher, when she saw that drawing, paused for a moment and quietly asked her, "Why is Daddy holding that?" She had even been ready to correct Daisy for glorifying violence. But Daisy just said, very seriously, because that day, only it could help my hair and my courage grow back together. In her world, right and wrong weren't defined by laws on paper. They were defined by who came to her when she cried and who flipped the switch when she was afraid. And that buzzing sound was the loudest counterattack of her childhood. The key slid into the lock and turned with a soft click. The second the door swung open, that familiar scent of home washed over me. I dropped my suitcase by the front door and called out, "Daisy, Daddy's home." No answer. The living room curtains were pulled tight and a dim light cast the whole room in shadow. I froze halfway through taking off my shoes. The house was too quiet. Miriam was at work, but Daisy was supposed to be here. I had called her right before I left the hotel, and she told me she was curled up on the couch watching TV. I walked toward the living room, and that knot of dread kept tightening in my chest. And then I saw her. My daughter, my little Daisy, was curled up in the narrow crack between the couch and the wall like a tiny, trembling shadow. She didn't lift her head to look at me. Her face was buried in her knees. The most shocking thing was her head. It was completely bare. Her pale scalp glowed cold in the darkness. That soft, silky black hair was gone. Not one strand remained. A buzzing sound filled my head, and my mind went blank like it had been flooded with static. The car key slipped through my fingers and skittered across the hardwood floor with a clatter. "Daisy," I said as I stepped closer, hearing my own voice come out weak and unfamiliar. Her shoulders jerked hard, and sobs she couldn't hold back anymore spilled out from the cradle of her arms. I knelt down and reached out to hold her, but my hand stopped in midair, terrified I would frighten her. "Daisy, look at Daddy." She slowly lifted her head. Her little face was streaked with tears. Her eyes were red and puffy, and her lips wouldn't stop shaking. She couldn't bring herself to look me in the eye. She just stared at the center of my chest. Daddy," she choked out through her cries. "Your hair. Who did this to you?" My voice was trembling when I spoke, and every word came out through clenched teeth. Hot blood rushed to my head. All I could hear was the crazed thundering of my own heart. It was Mrs. Albright. Daisy sobbed even harder, her voice already raw. She said my hair was too long. She said it would hurt my concentration. She said if I didn't cut it, she wouldn't let me come into class. Mrs. Albright, an image of a woman in her 30s, immediately sharpened in my mind. Daisy's homeroom teacher. I had met her at parent-teacher night. Her makeup was always perfect, and she spoke slowly, like she was looking down on everyone. My hands balled into fists without me even realizing it, my fingernails digging deep into my palms. What did she use to cut it? Clippers. The electric kind like at a barber shop, Daisy said between sobs. In her office, lots of other teachers were standing there watching. Her office. Electric clippers. A bunch of teachers standing around watching. The image exploded in my mind. My 8-year-old daughter pinned to a chair. The buzzing clippers grinding back and forth across her scalp. Clumps of hair falling to the floor, surrounded by the very adults she was supposed to trust. I pulled her into my arms. Her little body shook against mine like a leaf in a hurricane. I could feel her tears seeping into my shirt, cold and hot at the same time, like they were burning a hole right through my skin. My hand was shaking too, not from fear, from anger, the kind of anger that could burn bones to ash. "It's okay, Daisy. It's okay," I murmured softly in her ear, gently rubbing her back. "Daddy's home. Daddy is going to take care of this." She cried in my arms for what felt like forever, until exhaustion finally pulled her into sleep and her sobs faded away. I carried her back to her room, laid her gently on the bed, and tucked the covers around her. Even in her sleep, her brow was still furrowed, and a single tear that hadn't fallen yet clung to the corner of her eye. I left the room and quietly closed the door behind me. The living room was a disaster. The suitcase was still by the door, half open. I didn't care at all. I went straight into the bathroom and yanked open the cabinet under the sink. At the very bottom was a box, a men's grooming kit I had bought for myself before I got married. Inside lay a black pair of electric clippers. I took them out and flipped the switch. Buzz. The clippers roared to life, the sound harsh and almost frightening in the silent house. I looked up and met my own gaze in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot. My face was twisted by anger into something unfamiliar and grotesque. I shut off the clippers. Albright. I pulled out my phone, opened a class parent chat, and found her profile picture. It was a heavily edited photo. She smiled warmly, and her hair was styled into glossy, smooth waves. I smiled too. The cold light from my phone screen reflected off the metal casing of the clipper clippers in my hand, glinting once. I didn't sleep a wink that night. Daisy didn't sleep well either. She kept whimpering, crying in her sleep, saying no, please stop. I sat by her bed, wiping the cold sweat from her forehead, stroking her bald little head again and again. The texture was like coarse sandpaper grinding away at my heart. Sometime after midnight, she finally sank into a deep sleep. I went back to the living room and sat in the dark. After that first wave of raw fury faded, something cold and hard settled in my chest. I started thinking clearly. I opened my phone and searched for Albright's Facebook page. I scrolled through every single one of her posts. The newest one was from yesterday afternoon, a selfie at a fancy hair salon. Her signature wavy hair had just been styled, glossy and soft. It gleamed under the lights. The caption said, "A woman needs to know how to treat herself. Quarterly deep conditioning, check." A long list of parents had liked it. The comments were full of flattery. "Mrs. Albright, you are so beautiful, so elegant, and you work so hard. You deserve to treat yourself well." A wonderful role model for the kids. I stared at that photo. She treated her own hair like a precious treasure, yet she could destroy my daughter's hair so brutally. My little girl, who is only 8 years old. My knuckles turned white. I kept scrolling. She shared articles about education. Headlines like, "Why Rules Matter for Children. Without order, there is chaos and tough love. Why strict teachers are the best teachers." All garbage. I turned off my phone. A plan had already taken shape in my head. Simple, direct, and fair. I didn't want an apology. An apology is the cheapest currency on earth. What I wanted was for her to truly understand. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out my toolbox. I found a small, sharp, straight razor and a sharpening stone. For the rest of the night, I sat in the living room, slowly and methodically pushing that thin blade back and forth across the stone. Shush, shush, shush. The sound was piercing in the silent house. I deliberately slowed down, patient and focused, like a craftsman preparing for some solemn ceremony. Daisy's words kept echoing in my head. In her office, lots of teachers were standing there watching. They watched, but they did nothing. Good. This time, I would let everyone watch too. Close to daybreak, I checked the clippers to make sure the battery was full. I carefully wrapped the razor and the clippers in a cloth and put them in my briefcase. Inside was also the gift I had bought for Daisy on this trip, a delicate music box. I had planned to give it to her as soon as I got home. Now I just sat there, crammed in with those cold steel tools. Miriam called and asked if I had made it home. "I'm home," I said. She could hear something off in my voice. "What's going on? You sound weird. Is Daisy all right?" "Daisy is fine. Don't worry about her," I said. "There's something at home. I need to take care of it." I didn't tell her exactly what happened because I knew she would try to stop me, but this was something only I could do. After I hung up, I went to the kitchen and opened a can of soup. I heated it up and drank it fast. I needed the energy. Today was going to be a long day. A little before 7, I went to wake Daisy up. When she opened her eyes and saw me, her face brightened for just a moment, then fell again. She reached up and touched her head without thinking. "Daisy, get up. Get dressed. Eat breakfast. You're going to school today." My voice was calm. Fear flooded her eyes instantly. "I don't want to go." She ducked her head back under the blanket, her voice muffled. "They'll make fun of me." I reached in and pulled her out from under the blankets. I sat her on the edge of the bed and made her look at me. "Daisy, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. The other person is the one who was wrong. We don't ruin our own lives to pay for someone else's mistakes. Do you understand?" She nodded like she sort of understood, tears welling up in her eyes again. I held her little face in my hands and said, one word at a time, "Today, Daddy is going to school with you. I promise you, after today, no one will ever dare to laugh at you again. Daddy is going to make things right for you today." My face was probably pretty scary right then, but Daisy saw something different in it. She stared at me for a few seconds, then nodded firmly. She was quiet the whole time we ate breakfast. I peeled a soft-boiled egg and dropped it in her bowl. "Eat it. We need our energy." She ate it quietly, one little bite after another. On the drive to school, Daisy sat in the passenger seat, staring blankly out the window. I reached over and took her little hand. It was ice cold, like she just pulled it out of freezing water. "Are you scared?" I asked. She shook her head, then nodded softly. "It's okay to be scared," I said, "but remember, Daddy is right here. No matter what happens, you just stand next to me and watch." We pulled up to the school entrance right at peak drop-off time. Kids in uniforms were walking toward the front gate in groups, laughing and talking. Daisy reached for the hood of her sweatshirt without thinking, wanting to cover her head. I stopped her hand. "Don't hide. Walk in with your head up." She hesitated, but she listened. I parked the car, slung my briefcase over my shoulder, took her hand, and we walked toward the front gate together. The security guard at the gate recognized me. He waved and smiled. "Hey, Daisy's dad. Back from your trip?" I nodded. I didn't smile. The second I stepped on his school property, I could feel eyes on us. Kids, other parents. Those stares were like little needles poking into Daisy. Her whole body went stiff, and her steps slowed down. I squeezed her hand and whispered in her ear, "Don't look down. If they stare at you, you stare right back." I walked her through the crowd. I could hear whispers faintly around us. Look at that girl. Her head is completely shaved. What's wrong with her? I kept my eyes forward and walked toward the main building without slowing down. I knew exactly what I was going to do. It was 8 in the morning, right at morning assembly. Normally, Mrs. Albright would be in her office. But when I got to the big field in front of the school, I changed my mind. Several classes of students were lined up on the field, clearly getting ready for some kind of event. There was a small podium under the tall flagpole, and a familiar figure was standing there holding a microphone. It was Albright. She was wearing a crisp pantsuit. Her makeup was perfect, and her beautiful wavy hair was shining in the morning sun. She was directing the students to line up, speaking in a clear, musical voice, her posture elegant and composed. I stopped. Right here. The office would be too private. But right now, almost the whole school was here. It was perfect. Daisy, wait for Daddy right here. I let go of her hand and pointed to the big oak tree at the edge of the field. She looked up at me with worried eyes. Do what I told you. Stand here and watch. I gave her head a gentle pat, then turned and walked toward the middle of the field toward the podium. My steps weren't fast, but each one was heavy, deliberate. I held tight to my briefcase strap, my knuckles turning white. The noise of the school seemed to fade away. In my world, all that was left was that person on the podium. Soon someone noticed me, a man with a blank face and a clear purpose, walking straight across the field toward the stage. The kids stared at me with curious eyes. A few gym teachers at the edge of the field frowned at me. The first to move was the principal, a man in his 50s with a big bald spot on the top of his head. He hurried toward me with a professional smile plastered on his face. "Sir," he said, "we're about to start Monday morning assembly. How can I help you?" I didn't look at him. My eyes stayed fixed on Albright. "I'm here to see Mrs. Albright," I said. The principal's smile flickered. "Oh, Mrs. Albright. Well, as you can see, she's a little busy right now. Why don't you wait in the office?" And after the ceremony, I kept walking like I hadn't heard a word. He panicked a little, jumped in front of me, and stuck his arm out to stop me. "Hey, sir, let's talk about this. You can't just charge in there. It'll disrupt the students." I stopped and finally looked at him. Then I pushed him out of the way. I didn't even push him that hard, but he still stumbled back a few steps, shocked. He probably never thought a normal-looking parent would lay a hand on him. "Get out of my way," I said through my teeth. My voice wasn't loud, but the principal stood there like he was frozen. He looked into my eyes, and he must have seen something there that he didn't understand and couldn't stop because he didn't try to block me again. I kept walking toward the podium. By then, the whole field had noticed the uninvited guest. The noise slowly died down until hundreds of eyes were all staring at me at once. Albright saw me too, her brow furrowed and her face twisted with annoyance. She clearly knew who I was. "Mr. Miller, what is the meaning of this?" she said. "This is morning assembly. Please leave the field immediately." She lifted the microphone to her mouth, her voice dripping with that condescending tone she used for so-called problem students. I didn't stop. Step by step, I climbed the short steps up to the podium and stood right in front of her. The annoyance on her face shifted to alarm, and for a second, even panic. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "Security. Where's security?" Two guys who looked like gym teachers started running toward us, but I was already standing right in front of her, less than 2 feet away. I could smell her expensive perfume and see every sharp line of her eyeliner. I swung my briefcase off my shoulder and set it on the lectern. Click! The sound of the metal latch opening was picked up by the microphone she was still holding and echoed across the entire field. The whole place went dead silent. Albright stared at the open briefcase. Her face went from panic to confused, and then back to that usual condescending look of hers. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "This is a school. It's not a place for you to cause a scene." Her voice crackled with static as it blasted across the field through the speakers. I didn't answer her. I reached into the briefcase. The first thing I pulled out was the music box. Pink casing with a little ballerina on top. I set it gently on the lectern. Then I reached in again. This time I pulled out the black clippers. I flipped the switch. Buzz. The deep, powerful roar of the motor ripped through the quiet morning air. Amplified 10 times by the microphone, it sounded like a swarm of furious hornets boring into the ears of everyone watching. The field went quiet like someone had pressed mute. Hundreds of kids and dozens of teachers were all frozen where they stood. The color drained from Albright's face. She stared at the clippers in my hand, her mouth hanging open. Her composed, elegant image shattered instantly into raw fear. "You're crazy," she shrieked, her voice turning high-pitched and sharp. The two gym teachers were still about 20 feet away, completely stunned by what they were seeing. For a moment, they forgot to keep running. I took another step toward Albright. She screamed and stumbled backward, her back slamming into the flagpole behind her. "Stay away from me. Don't come any closer." I held the buzzing clippers up to the microphone. "Mrs. Albright, wasn't it you who said long hair hurts a child's concentration?" My voice was calm, but the speakers carried it clearly across the entire field. "You've always cared about rules and so-called proper education more than anyone, haven't you?" I stepped closer. She had nowhere left to go. She was pressed flat against the flagpole. "My daughter is only 8 years years old. Her mother grew her hair out for her strand by strand. She told me she wanted long hair so she could be a little princess. I looked out at the students below. I saw Daisy at the edge of the crowd. Her face was pale, but her back was straight and she was watching me closely. I turned my gaze back to Albright's terrified, contorted face. Tell me, could it be that your own hair is the thing getting in the way of you doing your job? I didn't wait for an answer. I lunged forward. My left hand grabbed her collar and yanked hard, pulling her off balance toward me. In that same motion, I wrapped my arm around her neck and locked her tight against my chest. She started thrashing wildly, screaming her head off. She clawed at my arm with her nails. The two gym teachers finally seemed to wake up, shouting, "Let her go," as they ran up the steps. I spun sideways, putting my back between them and her, and pressed the still buzzing clippers right against her perfectly styled hair. "Nobody move," I screamed, my voice breaking. "One more step, and I can't promise this blade won't slip and cut her scalp open." They froze in their tracks, faces white as ghosts. They didn't dare move another inch. The whole field fell into a strange, tense silence. All that was left was Albright's desperate, strangled crying and the constant buzz of the clippers. I put my mouth next to her ear and whispered, so only she could hear, "Now let me help you concentrate." The second the clippers touched her hair, I felt Albright's entire body flinch. Then came that soft but incredibly satisfying sound of shearing. A strand of dyed brown hair came loose from the blades, floated through the air, and landed on the red carpet covering the stage. A scream ripped out of Albright, something barely human. She thrashed like a caged animal, legs flailing, hands clawing at my arm around her neck. She was strong, but I was stronger. Years of working construction had taught me how to hold my ground in a fight. I dug my knee into her lower back, locking her down, while my right hand worked the clippers steadily from her front hairline all the way to the back. Another clump fell, then a third, then a fourth. The clippers left pale, glaring, ugly tracks right through the middle of her once perfect waves, like a field that had been brutally plowed. My hair, she sobbed, nearly choking on her own breath, her voice dripping with despair. "You're a monster. You're a demon." "That's right," I whispered in her ear. "I am a demon, and you're the one who summoned me." I never stopped moving. I was focused like a sculptor, every stroke precise and calm. I was going to finish this piece exactly the same as the one on my daughter's head. The students below were all frozen in shock. In her small world, they had never seen anything so raw, so direct. The teacher, who was always above them, whose word was law, was now like a trapped animal, pinned down and humiliated for everyone to see. Some of the younger kids had started crying. Others covered their eyes, but kept their fingers spread apart. Most of the kids just stood there with their eyes wide, not blinking, watching it all. On the faces of a few older kids, I even saw a glint of something almost like excitement. Maybe some of them had been victims of Albright's rules too. Down below, the principal was running around like a headless chicken, fumbling for his phone, his fingers shaking as he dialed. "Call 911. Call 911 right now." Has anyone called 911 yet? A few male teachers wanted to charge up too, but they froze at the bottom of the steps. When they saw the icy rage in my eyes, they pulled back. They were afraid I would actually hurt her. "You're going to prison. They'll lock you up," Albright wailed, throwing out the threat she thought would scare me most. "I know," I said, "but before that happens, I want your head as shiny bald as my daughter's." I moved faster. The clippers were efficient. Big clumps of hair fell in bunches, piling up at her feet. All that money she spent on quarterly deep conditioning had just turned into garbage on the floor. She started begging. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please stop. Please let me go." "Too late," I said. "My daughter begged you too. When you put those clippers on her head, did you stop?" My words cut her off like a knife. She went stiff, like all the strength had been sucked out of her. I kept going. Soon, most of her hair was gone. All that was left was a patchy layer of black stubble, uneven and rough. I shut off the clippers. She let out an audible breath, thinking the nightmare was over. But the next second, I pulled that straight razor out of my pocket, the one I had been sharpening all night. "The clippers aren't clean enough," I said into the microphone, my voice calm. "They leave stubble." My daughter's head didn't have a single hair left. I grabbed her chin and forced her face up toward the sky. The morning light fell across her face, tears and snot smeared across it. Her eyes were filled with absolute pure terror, 10 times worse than when the clippers first touched her head. I wasn't actually going to use the blade, but she didn't know that. I lifted the cold, gleaming blade and let catch the sunlight. Then I slowed my movements on purpose and pressed the flat side of the blade the dull metal side gently against her scalp. When that cold metal touched her skin, I held it there for a long time. Albright's entire body started shaking uncontrollably. Not fighting, just convulsing from the pure terror that was radiating from her very bones. She stopped screaming. All she could manage was a raspy wheeze, like a broken bellows. Every breath sounded like it was tearing her apart. I could feel her pulse hammering against my arm like a drum about to burst. I was patient. I let the moment stretch on as long as I could, letting the image burn itself into everyone's memory. The field below was terrifyingly quiet. If the Clippers had been raw violence, then this was calm, calculated cruelty. The sound was quieter, but it reached deeper into everyone's darkest corners. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the principal hang up with 911. Now he was yelling at the operator, barely making sense. The gym teachers looked pale green, frozen in place, not daring to move. I saw the kids too. The looks on their faces were astonishingly complicated. Fear, shock, fascination, and something they themselves couldn't name. A secret, satisfying release. Because Albright's rules were never just about hair. They were about the humiliation of being sent to the corner. The shame of being singled out in front of everyone. The helplessness of having a favorite toy taken away forever. And today, the woman who made those rules was being punished by something older and more primal than any rule she had ever written. The sun climbed higher, and the light reflected off Albright's freshly bald head, glaring and bright. Almost exactly like it had when I first saw Daisy at her front door. I finally stopped. I let go of her neck. She collapsed onto the stage like a puppet with its strings cut. She clutched her head with both hands, curled into a ball, and let out low, hopeless sobs. That once beautiful wavy hair was now just scattered brown clumps on the stage, drifting away in a morning breeze. I dropped the razor on the ground and picked up the microphone. I stood up straight and looked out across the field. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on me like spotlights. I clear my throat. My name is Edward Miller. I am a father of second grader Daisy Miller. My voice carried, without obstruction, to every corner of the field. I was away on a business trip for 20 days. Every single day, I video chatted with my daughter. I asked her how she was doing. She said she was fine. I asked if anything had happened. She said no. She's a thoughtful child. She didn't want me to worry. Last night, I came home and saw my daughter, my 8-year-old little girl. Her head shaved clean, not a single strand of hair left. She was hiding in the corner, too ashamed to look at me. My voice started to shake, but I forced myself to keep it steady. I pulled out my phone and found the photo I had taken of Daisy last night. She was asleep, her brow furrowed, her bare head on the pillow. I held the screen up so every teacher and student could see. It was this woman, I said, your esteemed Mrs. Albright. She personally shaved my daughter's head in her office, in front of other teachers, all because she thought a child's hair would hurt her concentration in class. She is 8 years old. I turned and nudged the crying heap on the ground with the toe of my shoe. Mrs. Albright, stand up. Let everyone see you. With your new hairstyle, will it hurt your ability to teach? She didn't move. She just cried harder. I took a deep breath and faced the crowd on the field again. I'm not a well-educated man, I said. I don't understand complicated theories. I only believe in one simple rule. An eye for an eye. If you dare touch one hair on my daughter's head, I will make you pay 10 times more. I'm telling you this in front of everyone today. From now on, in this school, no matter who it is, teacher or principal, if anyone dares to lay a hand on my daughter for any reason, I can promise you this. Next time, I won't just bring clippers. When I finished, I let the microphone fall to the ground. In the distance, sirens grew louder as they got closer. I turned and walked down the steps. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I walked straight to the big oak tree. Daisy was standing there. Tears were streaming down her face, but there was a bright, fierce light burning in her eyes. I walked up to her, knelt down, and opened my arms. She threw herself into my arms like a wild little creature, squeezing my neck, and finally let herself sob out loud. But this time, there was no fear in her tears. Tires screeched at the front gate. Several police cars pulled up, and officers rushed out. I just held Daisy. I didn't move. The field erupted into chaos. Teachers tried to calm the scared kids, shouting as they herded them toward the building. The principal stumbled toward the police, pointing his finger right at me. Officer, it's him. He attacked a teacher on school grounds. Two officers walked quickly toward me, their faces serious. The older one spoke. Sir, please put the child down and come with us. I gently set Daisy down, helped her stand steady, and wiped the tears off her face. Don't be scared. Daddy will be back soon. I looked her in the eye and said it. Daisy clung to my jacket and shook her head frantically. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were full of trust and a desperate plea for me not to go. Go find Mommy. Listen to her from now on, okay? I gave her bare little head one last pat. This time, when I touched her head, it didn't feel like that tearing pain anymore. It felt like something strange and fierce. Love. I stood up, turned to the officers, and held out my hands. I'll go with you. The cold cuffs clicked around my wrists. I looked back one last time. A few female teachers were helping helping Albright to her feet. Someone put a jacket over her shoulders. She was still sobbing hysterically. The principal was gesturing wildly to another officer, talking up the story as much as he could. His bald spot glinted in the sun, like it was part of his accusation. And my daughter Daisy was still standing under that oak tree. She had stopped crying. She just stood there, watching them take me away. Her stare was like a nail that pinned me in place and held me up at the same time. They put me in the back of the squad car. The second the door shut, I saw Miriam running through the school gate. She pushed through the crowd and pulled Daisy into her arms. The car pulled away. A young officer in the car kept stealing glances at me, like he had something to say but couldn't get out. The older officer driving said, "Did you really have to do that? Go and make such a huge spectacle. There are legal options, you know." I leaned my head back and watched the street outside blur past the window. The law. I let out a cold laugh. Can the law make my daughter's hair grow back in one night? Can the law wipe away the memory of her being humiliated? The law cares about process and evidence. What I wanted today was justice. The older officer went quiet. He had probably seen it before, seen all the times the law fell short. At the station, they took me to an interrogation room and went through the steps. Photos, fingerprints, my statement. I told them everything, exactly how it happened, from what I saw when I got home last night to every move I made at school today. I didn't hide anything. I didn't make excuses. You understand that what you did amounts to assault, the detective said. I understand. You know there will be legal consequences? I know. Do you regret it? I looked up and met his eyes. I only regret one thing, I said. I regret that I was gone for 20 days. If I'd been home, my daughter never would have gone through that. The interrogation got stuck there for a second. Later, Miriam showed up with a lawyer. The lawyer was in his early 40s, wearing a crisp suit. His name was Davis. They set up a private meeting between us. "Mr. Miller, this doesn't look good," he said, cutting straight to it. "The victim is a teacher. It happened on school property, in front of hundreds of kids. The public impact is terrible. The school and Albright both want you prosecuted to the maximum." I nodded. I had expected all of that. But Davis paused, his tone shifting. "It's not completely hopeless either. Your wife has been busy," he said. "She reached out to other parents." I was confused. "What do you mean?" She said after this all went down. The class parent chat blew up. A lot of parents started talking. They said their own kids have been punished and humiliated by Albright too. They just never dared to speak up before. Davis's eyes sparkled. "What you did today was like lighting a fuse. Now the public opinion might not be so lopsided. For the first time since this began, I felt something kindle inside me. So I wasn't carrying this alone after all. For the next 48 hours, I was held at the county jail. It was a little world sealed off from everything else. I had no idea what was happening outside, but I could tell things were changing from the way the officers acted. At first, they looked at me like I was just some violent, impulsive criminal. But later, their looks got more complicated. Sympathy, exhaustion, even a little hint of respect. Davis came to see me twice more. The second time, he brought a tablet. "Edward, you need to see this." He opened the local news site. The top story was about me. The headline was dramatic, like a movie tagline. "An eye for an eye father. Dad who avenged his shaved head daughter sparks national debate." The article had everything. A blurry photo of me on the podium with the Clippers. A screenshot of Albright crying, completely unraveled. And a picture of my daughter with her bald head. The kind that twists your heart. The comments had tens of thousands of replies. That was so satisfying to watch. "This is exactly how you handle a teacher like that. I don't condone violence, but I support this dad 100%. Some people don't deserve to be teachers. My son was once humiliated by a teacher in front of everyone so badly he couldn't even lift his head. He cried all night. I wish I had half this father's courage back then." Of course, there were opposing voices too. "This is vigilantism. He took the law into his own hands. He should face the maximum sentence. What kind of example does this set for kids? Solving problems with violence? That's completely unacceptable." But the voices supporting me were the overwhelming majority. But the real key was in the second half of the story. Dozens of parents whose kids had been in Albright's class came forward to talk to reporters. They provided piles of evidence. One child had been made to stand outside during the whole recess in the scorching sun just for talking during class. Another had their homework torn up right in front of them just because it wasn't neat enough. Some kids had been verbally abused with cruel, vicious words over a long time, leading to clear signs of anxiety. Another parent said Albright once grabbed his son by the ear in front of the entire class because of a low test grade and dragged him out of the room. One story after another, each one worse than the one before. The image of Albright as a responsible, caring teacher was shredded by these parents' stories. "Now all the pressure is on the school district," Davis explained as he scrolled. "They thought this was just a simple assault case. They never expected it to uncover a systemic problem that had been ignored for years. A teacher who had been bullying and abusing students for a long time. Albright has been suspended, pending a full investigation." I stared at the screen for a long time without saying anything. So Daisy wasn't wasn't the first victim. She was just the one with the most visible scar. If I hadn't done what I did, would all of this have stayed hidden? Would those kids have had to keep suffering under her rules and in their silence? Edward, Davis said, looking at me carefully, you did something most people only dream about and never dare to do. Legally, you were wrong. But on another level, the more important one, you were probably entirely in the right. I closed my eyes and saw Daisy's bright, worshipful eyes again. In that moment, a peace I had never known rose up from deep inside me. What I did was right. Things moved faster than anyone expected. As more and more parents came forward with evidence and testimony, the tide of public opinion started to shift. This was no longer just a father's revenge. It had become a public trial of teacher bullying and school negligence. The State Board of Education launched a formal investigation into the school. The principal was suspended for long-term negligence and for ignoring multiple complaints about the teacher's behavior. The school's official Facebook page was flooded with angry messages from across the country. Hundreds of thousands of comments demanding answers, demanding justice for every child who had been hurt there. Under that enormous public pressure, Albright and the school district did a complete 180-degree turn. The school, which had initially demanded that prosecutors come down hard on me, sent representatives to Davis to say they wanted a peaceful resolution. Albright herself sent word through family members that she would issue a public apology to me and Daisy and pay financial compensation. I sat in the visitation room, listening to Davis tell me all of this, and I couldn't help but laugh. A bitter, ironic laugh. They're scared, I said. Scared to death. What they really care about isn't punishing me. It's how to save themselves. Davis nodded. For us, this is a very good turn of events. If we can get her formal written forgiveness, you'll be in a much stronger position in court. I don't want her money, I said. An apology is fine, but it has to be face-to-face with my daughter. Davis nodded. Got it. I'll set it up. A few days later, in a courthouse conference room, I saw Albright again. She wore plain clothes and no makeup. She had a knit cap on to cover her head. She looked haggard and shaken. That arrogant authority from that day on the field was completely gone. Miriam came with Daisy. The second Daisy saw Albright, she instinctively hid behind her mother. Albright stood there, rubbing her hands together, her lips shaking. After a long time, she finally managed to speak. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Miller, I'm sorry. Her voice was hoarse, thick with crying. Then she looked at Daisy. Daisy, I am so sorry. I shouldn't have. I never should have done that to you. I was wrong. She broke down sobbing before she could finish. How much of her regret was real and how much was just pressure, I didn't know. I didn't really care. What mattered was that Daisy was watching. She saw it with her own eyes. The person who used to make her shake with fear. The adult who held her fate in her hands. Now she was a broken, crying mess, quietly begging for forgiveness. I knelt down and put my hands on Daisy's shoulders. Daisy, do you accept her apology? Daisy peeked out from behind her mother. She looked at Albright, then up at me. After a long pause, she gave a small nod. Albright looked like a huge weight had been lifted off her. She let out a long sigh. She almost crumbled to the floor. I stood up and looked at Davis. All right, have her sign whatever you need. I didn't actually need to forgive her. I just needed to untie that tight knot of fear inside my daughter's heart. In the end, I didn't get prison time. The judge considered everything. The extreme provocation, the evidence of her long-term misconduct, the victim's formal forgiveness, the fact that no serious physical injury was caused, and the enormous public pressure. The verdict was that I was guilty of misdemeanor assault, but with strong mitigating factors. I got 6 months of probation and a fine. Probation meant I didn't have to go to jail. I just had to check in with my probation officer. For me, that was the best possible result. The day I walked out of the courthouse, the sun was shining bright. Miriam and Daisy were waiting for me outside. Daisy's hair had already grown into a soft little buzz cut. The second she saw me, her whole face lit up. She grinned and ran straight into my arms. Daddy, I lifted her up high and kissed her cheek. It was all over. Albright got fired. I heard she moved out of state after that. No one ever heard from her again. The principal got demoted and transferred to a desk job downtown, pushing papers. The school went through a major overhaul. The new principal was a serious, tough woman. She came to our house herself to apologize and promised that the school's culture and practices would change completely. Many of the parents who had supported us became our friends. Miriam started a new parent chat. Everyone shares parenting advice and school updates. The vibe has always been positive and supportive. Life seemed to go back to normal, but some things had changed forever. Because of my record, I lost my old job, but it didn't matter anymore. I took the money the school district paid us, plus the savings I had scraped together over the years, and opened a small hardware store near our community. It wasn't a big operation, but it was enough to take care of my family. More importantly, I was home every day. I took Daisy to school myself and picked her up. I helped her with homework. I listened to every little thing that happened in her day. I never had to travel for work again. We moved Daisy to a new school. She thrived there. She made lots of new friends. She wasn't that shy, quiet little girl anymore. She slowly became more outgoing and confident. She even joined the school choir. Her hair slowly grew back, from a buzz cut to chin length, until she could finally pull it into a tiny ponytail. Sometimes I watch her run around on the field, her hair flying behind her, and I thought about that morning. The man who walked into that school carrying the clippers. I often asked myself if I could go back to that day, would I still do it? The answer was always the same. Yes, I don't regret it at all. That was the most right thing I have ever done in my entire life. It might not have been legal or rational, but it gave a father back his dignity. It gave a little girl back her peace of mind. It chased the darkness out of her childhood. One summer afternoon a year later, the hardware store was doing well. The neighbors all looked out for me. Every single one of them had heard my story. The way the neighbors looked at me always carried a special kind of respect. Business was slow that afternoon. I sat on a chair outside the store, staring across the street. Daisy was walking home from school. She was wearing a pretty sundress, her backpack over her shoulder, holding hands with her friends, laughing and talking as they walked. Her hair was down to her shoulders now, tied in two little pigtails that swung and bounced with every step. The sun hit her hair and made it shine like gold. The second she spotted me, her eyes lit up. She waved goodbye to her friends and came running across the street straight toward me. "Daddy," she called out, her voice as clear as a little bell. I opened my arms and caught my little cannonball. "Did you have a good day at school?" I asked. "Super good," she said, and gave me a big kiss on the cheek. Today my teacher said my drawing was the best in the whole class. "Oh yeah? What did you draw?" "I drew our family," she said, pulling a paper out of her backpack with pride. The paper had 3 people on it. Mommy was in a dress with long hair. Daisy had her 2 little pigtails and was beaming. And Daddy. In the picture, I wasn't holding a wrench or a screwdriver. I was holding the clippers. She had drawn the clippers all golden and glowing, like a superhero's sword. I stared at that drawing and my throat got tight. "Daisy, Daddy is the hero who protects me," she said, pointing at the clippers with genuine pride in her eyes. "This is his super weapon." My nose stung and my eyes got wet. I had thought that whole thing would leave a scar on her. I had thought that in her memory, it would be something she tried her hardest to forget. But she didn't forget. In her innocent little world, she had redefined that cold, violent tool. It had become the warmest symbol of protection. That wasn't a scar. It was a badge of honor. I held my daughter tight. She smelled like sunshine and freshly cut grass. The best smell in the world. I looked up at the deep blue sky. Cotton candy clouds drifted by. That morning full of anger and violence felt like it was so long ago, but it was still burned deep into every nerve in my body. It reminded me every day what a father's job really is. To protect his child. I can be a patient craftsman, and when I need to be, I can become a warrior with a weapon in my hand. No matter what it costs, I will do it, because she is my whole world. When we close this story, what echoes in our hearts might not be the cold verdict of the law, but that primal, powerful buzz. That sound was both the beginning of the wound and the call to fight back. This story does not glorify violence. It is more like a prism, showing how the oldest and most fierce human instinct to protect will erupt when the rules of civilization fail. We cheer for the father in this story, not because we believe in an eye for an eye, but because in his actions we see our own unspoken voices magnified. When someone we love is hurt, when procedural justice cannot heal a specific bleeding wound, what do? The story does not give us an easy answer. It throws a difficult question back at us. It forces us to ask where the limits of the law are and how far a parent's love should reach. This is not just a story about revenge. It is a story about redefinition. A tool of humiliation, the clippers, was redefined by a daughter's paintbrush as a hero's scepter. A trauma that could have left a lifelong scar was redefined by a father's desperate actions as a crowning moment of love and courage. That is the deepest lesson this story offers us. We cannot choose the wounds life gives us, but we will always have the power to choose the story we tell about them, to overcome them, and to draw strength from them. Maybe most of us will never face a choice as extreme as this, but all of us have felt helpless and angry at some point, wishing we could find justice for ourselves or for someone we love. This story is like a distant but steady echo. It understands your anger. It honors your willingness to protect what matters. It tells us to be the one who breaks the silence when faced with injustice, to have the courage to do whatever it takes when protecting what we hold dear. Because in the end, who we are is not defined by how many rules we followed. It is defined by what we chose to protect when it counted most.